A group of leading U.S. manufacturers is calling on the United States to enact stronger trade barriers to Chinese imports. Joining us right now is Scott Paul. He's the president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing, which is a nonprofit, nonpartisan alliance of U.S. manufacturers and the United Steelworkers Union. Scott, why don't you tell us a little bit about why you think we need tougher tariffs?
Well, part of it, Becky, is that we've seen this before. We saw a China shock 20 years ago. We lost 1 in 3 manufacturing jobs. We slipped out of first place globally in manufacturing. Our export performance plummeted. And we've been able to rebuild that very carefully over the last 15 years. But a lot of communities have been left behind. And now we see China with a tremendous amount of overcapacity in vehicles, EVs in particular, but also internal combustion engines. We see it in solar. We see it again in steel. And we kind of know how this plays out. The sequel's not going to be any better. And I think that we can limit the damage by getting in front of this. And I would say on EVs, it seems like the Biden administration agrees with that. And it seems like the EU is coming around to that view as well. But there's a lot more that needs to be done, Becky.
I saw Janet Yellen speaking last week, and she laid out the argument. What I didn't realize is that the Chinese have taken all of the money that they used to put into infrastructure internally and are now spending it on manufacturing production. I guess they already make up about 30% of the world's manufacturing, and if that number rises, it's hard to imagine how the globe absorbs all that manufacturing output without having some huge impact on domestically our manufacturing in other nations, too. I understand the pushback, but I just wonder if you wind up being in a situation like Smoot-Hawley back in 1930, when that was passed to protect American farmers. What it did was cut global trade down as other nations also raised their tariffs, and it really hurt global economy in a huge way.
Yeah, look, I understand that concern. We're in a far different situation we were in the 1930s. We were a trade surplus country then. We have $1 trillion deficit in goods trade every year. And I think if we do this carefully, there's not going to be any sort of consumer shock. And Becky, this is important because we're trying to build some of these industries of the future, and the automotive sector in particular is at the core of American manufacturing and is responsible directly and indirectly for about 3% of GDP. And so we're at a very delicate time here. China now has enough overcapacity to supply somewhere between 5 and 10 million vehicles into the global market, and all they want is market share. So they'll sell them at dump prices, and that's going to be devastating to auto communities, not only in the United States, but also to the European Union. So the stakes are high, and I agree we need to be careful about our approach to this, but I do think that getting ahead of it is the right answer.
How is this not inflationary? American consumers have benefited from years from global trade that brings us lower price goods.
Well, one of the things that I think some of the investments in manufacturing are trying to do in semiconductors and clean energy manufacturing and EVs is gradually bring down the costs here in the United States. And I think that we can do that quite effectively. And Becky, let's also remember that there's a difference between price and cost. I mean, the China price is artificially low, and that is market distorting. And in the long run, that has external costs that just aren't calculated at that point of sale, but they can be devastating. We know about some of the supply chains and the labor issues in China. We know about the methods of production in China, even for clean energy goods, which are contributing to pollution. So there is a way to do this. And I do know that the inflationary impacts of the tariffs that have been put into place have been negligible. That's not what's driving it. I mean, you see groceries or gasoline or the amount of housing stock have been the main drivers of inflation. It hasn't been those goods that have been subject to tariffs. So I don't think at all that this would have a lot of upward pressure on inflation. In fact, I think a strategy that includes tariffs but also those internal investments that we're talking about is going to be good for the consumer in the long run, Becky.
Scott, I understand arguments about defense, about how there are certain areas that we should not be entirely reliant on other countries for. That was kind of lesson that was hit home during the pandemic when you saw supply chain issues with everything from medical supplies to semiconductors. I know there's a lot of concerns about those things, but what we've done with the CHIPS Act and other things with the IRA, we are putting through bills where we are subsidizing our own industries. You said that this is not fair because China is subsidizing their industries so heavily, but we have our partners, our G7 partners, and our allies who have accused us of doing the same thing. I mean, it's complicated. I understand there's a lot of different sides to this, but it does seem that there's been a huge shift in what both political parties are kind of focusing on and what they think is the right way to do things from what we've been dealing with for the last 50 or 60 years.
Yeah, I certainly hear you on that. And I want to talk a bit about what the differences are. This is a feature of the Chinese Communist Party system, is to have these 5-year plans, to have state-owned enterprises, and to acquire technology innovation and to massively subsidize its own industry, and to do that to export and to gain global market share. The idea, I think, both in the United States and in Europe, is simply to say we need a foundational level of manufacturing in our countries. This isn't designed to gain a massive export advantage and to build up overcapacity in our own markets that we'll then need to find markets for abroad. It's entirely different than that. In fact, it's a defense mechanism. And as I said, I think it's good for economic national security. I think the consumer benefits in the long run from having those choices rather than from having state-owned Chinese firms dominate global markets like they do now, for instance, in steel, glass, solar, and so many industry. That really limits our options.